Welcome to Climate Optimists. I'm Jason Lewis.
And I'm Todd DeShido.
So the podcast is still on spring break until next week, but we're bringing you another short to tide you over. And speaking of spring break, how's yours going, Todd?
I'm going to choke you out about this spring break stuff. I'm telling you right now. I haven't done
You're
any
working
spring
50
break.
or 60 hours a week.
Oh, yeah, it's something like that, man. It's, that's such is life. So yeah, my spring break has been pretty hammered. What about your spring break?
Well, I've been, of course, working on the podcast a little bit, but I did manage to sneak in
You
a
don't
little.
lie to us.
Well, I did squeeze in a little skiing up in Canada. Wanted to make sure,
Little looks like he shot a mag. You should see the pictures this guy sends me from this stuff. It looks like he's shooting a magazine up there. There's all these big gigantic mountains in the background, and
if you can't have fun, somebody's got to go have fun on the...
That's right, somebody's got to do it. Those slopes aren't going to ski themselves.
I'm happy to take one for the team.
Well, I'm glad, man. You deserve it.
So, like last week, we thought we'd focus this short on bringing a little climate hope. For those who aren't aware, there was a record-breaking auction for offshore wind leases located off the coast of New Jersey and New York. This auction was, pretty anticipated because the last one that took place was back in 2018, focused on some areas off the Massachusetts coast, and they're estimating, potential capacity of anywhere from 5.5 to 7 gigawatts. And for context, that's, roughly 2 to 2.5 million homes. The exciting part, though, was compared to the last auction, the winning bids were substantially higher. So, in 2018, you were looking at about $1,000 an acre.
Okay.
And the winning bids that came in for this latest auction, which wrapped up right around the beginning of March, were $9,000 an acre. So, almost tenfold.
That's a lot.
It is. And I think it's really a positive sign. I mean, when you have a lot of interest, that tends to indicate that you've got developers that are really serious about developing projects. The other hopeful sign from my perspective is that, oil giants Shell and Total were among the winning projects.
Really?
Yeah, which,
that strikes me as odd.
Shell obviously also invests a lot for folks who don't know, in climate disinformation, but they it's good to see that they're spending some money on offshore wind, and I see it as a hopeful piece because the reality is we all know that oil and gas is a profitable business, and so to have these two entities involved means you've got more capital on the table, and that all leads to potentially faster development.
So we kind of got the East Coast thing going, but what about the West Coast?
There actually is an auction for some area off the California coast planned for later this year, and then some area off the Oregon coast. I think they're slated to auction that in 2023. But the reality is, you're right. I mean, most of the attention has been off the Atlantic coast, and the primary reason for that is you've got a much shallower seabed. So, in the Atlantic, things taper off a lot more gradually.
Sure.
It makes it a lot more economical, to install the turbines. So naturally, when you look at where developers have been focusing, it's almost all on the Atlantic.
I see. I think maybe we're missing a huge opportunity here, and that is that what we need to do to push this development is to bring back the West Coast, East Coast hip hop rivalry, and instead, that's an ask of you, Jason, is you got to get these hip hop artists on board, get Snoop on the line, and get this moving.
Oh, so you're not just envisioning, we're talking more than just, mirroring an East Coast, West Coast rivalry, but you're saying we want to get the, East Coast and West Coast rap stars involved.
I want them involved, and they do rap. We do concerts out here on the beach. You know what I'm saying?
You heard it here first, folks.
If Snoop can play at my hometown in Ontario, Oregon, at the opening of a pot shop, we can make this happen.
I still have a few connections in the wind energy marketing world. We can pitch the idea to them.
I'm telling you, they're missing out. They got to do it.
Well, there's definitely going to be plenty of room to promote because the Biden administration has set a target of 30 gigawatts by 2030, which is huge considering the fact that up until now, offshore wind has really been just two small projects. And so
Right.
where you've got Europe and China that are way down the path on offshore, we're really just getting started.
So when we talk about 30 gigawatts, what is that the equivalent of? Or I'm trying to think of like hydro here in the Pacific Northwest as kind of like a comparison.
Yeah, it's a good question. And the calculations that you do to sort of figure out how many homes you're going to power depends not just on sort of the capacity of the turbines, whether those are, hydroelectric or wind, but it also depends on how, often those are running.
Mm-hmm.
When you're estimating though with wind energy, generally a megawatt can power on average about 350 U.S. homes plus or
Okay.
minus, and because you have 1,000 megawatts in a gigawatt, 30 gigawatts really equates to around 10.5 million U.S. homes. So
Whoa.
it's a big it's a big chunk.
Yeah.
And it's obviously not all we need out of offshore wind, but I think it's an ambitious target and helps set the trajectory that we need to get to 100% renewable by 2050.
Wow. I wouldn't even thought that was possible, but that's crazy.
I'm with you though. It is pretty hard to imagine putting that many wind turbines in between now and 2030 off the coast. But yeah, it's an exciting space, and it'll be interesting to see how things unfold over the next year or so.
Yeah,
Well, I think this all leads us to the need to do an episode on offshore wind, which we haven't yet.
definitely. We've kind of just scratched the surface here. It'd be cool to, dig into this thing.
Yeah, and once you're back from spring break and into the swing of things, we can
We can
see
finally
what
get
we can
moving
schedule.
here.
Well, I think that's a wrap for our short this week. We'll be back to full episodes starting next week, where we'll be digging into the topic of climate justice. In the meantime, thanks for tuning in. Climate Optimists is made possible by Climate Stewards Collective. You can find us on the web at climateoptimist.co. And don't forget to follow us on social at Climate Optimist Podcast.